All right. Well, it looks like the time is 5:30, so we can go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone for making it to this month's Accessibility Twin Cities Meetup. We're very excited to be presenting on the topic of accessibility overlays. The title for this evening's event is Are Accessibility Overlays Overbaked? We'd like to thank our sponsors, United Health Group and WeCo Accessibility Services. Without them, this meetup would not be possible, so special thanks to them. Just a couple housekeeping items. The schedule has been posted to the meetup page for the remaining dates of the year. We try to hold our events on the last Monday every other month. There is one change to that. The May meetup will be taking place the first Monday of June due to the Memorial Day holiday. Otherwise, we're looking at the last Monday of the month. So go ahead and head on over to the Accessibility Twin Cities meetup page if you'd like to know more about when those dates are, RSVP, and so on. Second item is we have made an update to our member dues. This year, with everything that took place in 2020 and events moving virtual, a lot of the inherent costs to holding the meetup have been reduced and removed. And we've passed that savings along and made the membership fee nominal amount of $5 per year. And as always, anyone that you think might be interested, feel free to invite them. They can enjoy a 60-day free trial, which guarantees them access to at least one meetup event to see what it's all about. And lastly, the topic for our March meetup has been chosen. We are going to discuss the process of accessibility part 3. This is kind of a series that we've been going with, talking with different accessibility professionals about their experiences with accessibility and learning along the way. This next meetup in March, we will be having Debbie Heilig talking about her time working at Deluxe and learning about accessibility. So more to come on that. We'll be posting more details in the event page later this week, and hope everyone can make it there. Moving on to tonight's event, I'd like to introduce our facilitator, Lynn Wehrman. Lynn is the founder and president of WeCo Accessibility Services. I'll go ahead and just hand it on over to you, Lynn.
Thanks, Andy. Say, Andy, is there some way we can turn off the chimes? There should be a way we can deactivate the doorbell.
Yep, I'll work on that now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hey, welcome everybody. We're so excited to have you with us for the first meetup of the year. And thank you to Andy for getting us all set up. My name is Lynn Wehrman. I'm the founder and president of WeCo Accessibility Services. We're the co-sponsor of Accessibility Twin City Meetup, which is fast becoming Accessibility Meetup because it's no longer just the Twin Cities. We have people from around the world that are joining this meetup, which is fun. But we're also really, really pleased to be working with Optum Health, who co-sponsors this with us, and have a wonderful member that's been with us from the start, Bill Tyler, who presents every once in a while with us. So we're happy to be here tonight. All right, next slide. Okay, and without further ado, we're going to jump right into the meat. We are really excited to have Charles Hall back. Charles was with us this fall when we had a discussion that drifted into overlays and accessibility tools. So we thought of him right away when we knew we wanted to present on this topic. Charles is a senior accessibility designer currently with CVS Health. He's also part of the WCAG's Accessibility Guidelines Working Group and Silver Task Force. He's currently chair of the W3C Inclusive Design for Immersive Web Community Group. and a member of the Ferndale Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Committee. And he's also been a really good friend to our meetup and been very gracious to volunteer his time and knowledge. So we're so pleased to have him back. Next slide. We also have, to round things out a bit, WeCo's accessibility specialists. And our team is led by Director of Accessibility Services, Sue Ann Rodriguez, who's in that lower left. And her team members, lead accessibility specialist Jen Hurst, and accessibility specialist Dane Dunham, and a couple of new specialists you may have not met yet, Jenny Manello and Casey Matthews. So they are going to be around. The great thing about our team is that they all live with different disabilities, so they're going to be able to bring some expertise. Next slide. So what we're going to just do is actually a pretty unstructured topic on my end. Charles is going to bring all the structure into it. We're going to talk about overlays, why not? Bring in some firsthand experiences, and then I'm just going to round it out with a little bit of legal research that I did on how overlays are impacting how people are actually doing business, if they're being sued, what's happening around that. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand this over to Charles.
Thanks, Lynn, for the introduction. I actually don't have a lot of structure. I would like to pause for opportunity to answer any questions along the way, so feel free to interrupt me. I'd like to keep it conversational versus structured, but I am going to read from some material that I have written on this topic in the past, as well as share some thoughts that I've added along the way. I don't have anything to present necessarily, just information on the topic broadly. So first, to level set what it is we're actually talking about here, because this product and space that it resides in has actually had several names, thanks to the various organizations that create them and promote them and then inherit them and use them. The idea of sort of standardizing on the term overlay to best describe them is that's literally what this product does. We're talking about essentially a code-driven, usually entirely JavaScript extension to a website. You throw a line of JavaScript, it goes and loads a JavaScript-based application, injects some stuff into the document, and that stuff that it injects allows a panel to sit alongside or over the top of the website, which intends to provide, I should say, a menu of features that claim to improve the accessibility and the experience of the site. Some of those features are the ability to change the contrast. Some of them are to change the font size. Some of them are to turn images off in order to better read text content on the site. They're all well intended to provide a method of customizing the display of what's on the screen by putting another panel of tools alongside that screen. And the market of this is collectively known as overlays. The number one thing that all of these products claim to be able to do is fix a website. In other words, to detect and then remediate issues that are failing various WCAG criteria. And that is simply not possible. So the claim is blatantly false. So any of us that work in the field of doing evaluations against websites and digital products for whether or not they conform to the standards and comply with various laws, it is relatively familiar with the fact that software can't detect the overwhelming majority of WCAG criteria. So if you take WCAG 2.1 level AA conformance as the standard that you're evaluating against, you have 56 success criteria. Only roughly 19 of those 50 can even be detected by software, let alone fixed by software. So the claim that they can fix issues is absolutely blatantly false. But the claims of how they do it tend to get a little bit murky and actually make things even worse. So one of the ways that the most popular product on the market claims to do this is through the use of AI. AI, standing for artificial intelligence, is basically when you have software that can evaluate something and make decisions based on a model that it has learned from, and then take action on the decision it has made. And the only feature that any of these products actually have that comes close to being an AI is image content evaluation and providing of automated image descriptions, similar to how automated captions are done for video. So at best, you're going to get a very limited machine-driven interpretation of the content of an image and describe it. So for example, if you have a picture of a cat and it's doing something special, and the special thing is what you want to convey, the automated image description that you're going to get from their AI is cat. Not very useful, not very informative, and does not conform to WCAG and is not helpful to people. So the claim that they are using AI to automatically detect and remediate these things is also blatantly false. And even those that come close to using some sort of AI service for that image description, they're basically leveraging third-party APIs that already exist out there from larger players like Google. So the gist of all of this is that there are a number of products on the market that claim to be able to provide this service of automatic detection and automatic remediation. And those are not only false, they represent a misdirection. And that misdirection is basically the fact that they are using the marketing of this claim of compliance to convince organizations to invest in a recurring subscription fee to this software as a service platform. And that investment diverts funds from actually addressing accessibility issues, and it deprioritizes any other form of investment in making sure web and other digital content is actually accessible out of the gate. So in my opinion and the opinion of other professionals in the field, these things are not only snake oil, but they're worse than snake oil because not only do they not live up to their claims, but they take away from any true effort to make the web accessible. And on top of all of that, they also introduce issues of their own. So as I said, in describing the product, they're essentially JavaScript based. So without getting overly technical, the JavaScript is loading another application on top of your website. So at the very least, performance should come to mind, right? So you have a number of synchronous and asynchronous things loading and happening and listening on top of what you have already produced and delivered with your website. It's going out and grabbing all of this third-party content to do more of the same. So there is inherently a performance hit. On top of that, JavaScript events can be blocking. So there is introduced and unexpected latency on top of those performance issues. And there are a number of other access issues in actually attempting to utilize the product. So one of the other topics that we'll get to later is the legal landscape. One of the things that's happening within that landscape is sites that have deployed some of these overlay products are still receiving complaints and demand letters and lawsuits against them in the United States, and that volume is increasing. And now we actually see lawsuits against sites specifically because they have these overlay products on them, because the product itself is introducing new accessibility issues. There is a recent case where we have a professional, a peer in our industry, Carl Groves, who works for a company called Tenon, who has produced a number of articles against these overlay products, has produced a very comprehensive document in as an exhibit of evidence within a case against a website using one of these overlay products. And in that document of evidence in this case has not only outlined all of the reasons accessibility overlays can't fulfill their claims, but also goes on to demonstrate the actual new issues that this overlay product introduces. One of those is discovering the thing in the first place. So in order to activate this overlay product, the challenge is the path to it is behind activating a button whose label is accessibility feedback and statement. That button label tells you nothing about the fact that there are features intended to help you behind activating that button. And activating that button still only produces a document, which you then have to peruse and basically acknowledge in order to activate the thing in the first place. Once you've done that and determined that behind all of this feedback and statement is a service intended to help you, then the product includes things like a language selector. And the language selector then has buttons in it to activate individual languages, and those buttons are inaccessible. So it's just astonishing the amount of evidence that the accessibility design and development communities as well as the disability community has produced to invalidate all of the claims that these overlay products make. And now we have additional court introduced documented evidence of the issues that they add instead of remove from a website. I know I've kind of just rambled on and meandered across some of the core issues, but I'd like to get back to just WCAG for a second. So we know that detecting issues is something that software has a challenge with, right? There's an overwhelming amount of tools out there that we probably all are familiar with and use and rely on in conducting cursory evaluations of things. And we know what the limitations of those tools are, and we know that those results come back to us basically saying, these are issues that are known errors that software can detect. These are issues that might be errors that we need a human to verify, and these are possible issues on the page that a human should go and evaluate on their own. Well, among those things that software can't detect are really critical things, like the ability to pause, stop, and hide, the ability to have audio control, whether or not captions and transcripts for audio only content or audio content and videos exists on the page. And that's because there's a number of methods to implement those. It can't detect audio description. It can't detect keyboard traps. It can't detect effective focus management. It can't detect error prevention and error handling. It can't detect content that relies on sensory characteristics to understand, and it can't detect reading level. And that's just a short list of things that software can't detect. So obviously among those are some very important things. So if a overlay product vendor is out there claiming that they can automatically make a website conform to WCAG and therefore comply with law, it's just blatantly false. It's not possible. It's not responsible. It's not what the intent of accessibility is. And I think I should pause there and see if we have any questions so far. I can't monitor the chat at the same time, so maybe Lynn, if you
It's what we've got
can
in
take a look.
for. We've got a lot of blog entry sharing, and I'm actually going to just put out the one that our team just put out yesterday, titled the same thing as this presentation, Our Overlays Overbaked. Are there any questions from anybody?
I also have chronicled articles that have been published over the last few years, so I have many of these links available as well.
We'll make sure that we get those out into the membership page afterwards so everybody can access those. I'm wondering if I can ask a question of the group. I'm wondering, is there anyone that is here tonight because you feel like this was the thing that you were going to be able to do to really make accessibility work, but you're hesitant, or if anybody wants to share why, why they came or what they're wondering about with overlays?
Hi, Lynn. My name is Marcia.
Hi, Martha.
So I work for a regional center. We're grant funded. We provide information training on the ADA and web accessibility. And so we get quite a few calls on overlays. And, obviously we can't point out vendors or anything. So we just try to steer them to the information, but like I did have this call where someone said, well, I spoke to X vendor's president, and he assured me all these things, and you know, and I, I just said, well, here's the information and things you might want to consider, but sometimes you have to tread this line about getting the information out as opposed to misinformation. So that's kind of where, I try to, provide as much information as I can and resources, but tread that line in providing, like I say, the best technical assistance I can to get them, because they see it as a quick fix, like you say, and they don't see, that in the long run, it, as Charles pointed out, it's hurting their bottom line. It's actually adding, because it's like, like putting lipstick on a pig, So.
And I think that I'll just jump in real quick, Charles, and let you take it. But I think that there are a lot of companies that think that they're actually helping, but they haven't taken the time to really understand the needs of users that live with disabilities. They look at it from a very narrow perspective. And so it's not that necessarily there are tons and tons of people out there being opportunists. It's that they've just not taken the time to look at the entire problem. Charles?
Yeah, so I'll go backwards to the comment and segue from what you just said. That's a really, really fair and important observation, is that some of the organizations out there who are providing this software as a service product actually are well-intentioned, and they have good products among their suite of offerings, in addition to unfortunately also providing overlays. And I'm trying really hard not to name these organizations. But there is one out there that is a plague on our field. And I am guessing and hoping that many of you are familiar with having come across the name. And again, I'm trying to avoid using the name. But if you search on Google for accessibility related information, anytime in the past 18 months, about half of the page one results you're going to get come from this organization who is selling this product. And the reason is they are very heavily funded. And that funding has basically monopolized search marketing. And the disinformation that we have to overcome is overwhelming. So small businesses and medium businesses and even large organizations are coming across this information and believing it simply because they're owning search results at the moment. So when people are entertaining, when we have clients or the businesses that we work for, or friends or partners or allies who are considering using one of these products, the very first thing that will help is addressing the misinformation. So one of the most reliable ways to address misinformation is to redirect to better sources of information. And one of the best sources of information that we have is the Web Accessibility Initiative from W3C. So if we could just say, take your attention from this shiny object over here that's buying all of the search marketing and claiming this thing, and shift it over here to the reason why we want things to be accessible in the first place, then maybe we can better have that conversation and help inform people on why you would want to avoid this kind of solution. There was something else in the comment that I felt was addressing in it, worth addressing, and unfortunately I lost it along the way. I think it's probably also relevant to consider why someone wants to become accessible, right? So if if an organization is newly inquiring about accessibility and becoming accessible, one of the ways that is one of the events that has most likely driven them to that point is they have received a demand letter or a complaint, or something has gone wrong. Someone has pointed out a lack of accessibility, and thus now they are interested in becoming accessible. That is a particularly important moment to make sure that the misinformation does not enter the realm of consideration. Because if someone is pointing out that they have encountered a barrier on your website or digital product, the response that you want to provide is, we're happy to help you, not we're going to slap a plugin on it and make the problem go away.
I would like to, at this time, just redirect the discussion a little bit, because I know that the team at WeCo has had, I remember our introduction to an overlay was when we were hired by a client who's someone else on his team had bought one and he didn't believe it. And we got hired to vet it. And it was very, very early on when these things were first being released. And we were really, really surprised. So Sue Ann, I'm wondering if I can call upon you or members of your team to describe what's happened in the work that you've done with overlays, how that comes to play. And I'm sure Charles will have things to add along with that too.
So I'm going to ask Dane if he would like to begin that conversation.
And just caution that we won't be mentioning clients, but just,
right.
Okay, great.
Well, when I see these overlays, I usually either disable them or I don't use them unless we're directed to, because they tend to, they can, well, let me just put it like this. They can sometimes kind of create an issue, like we talked about earlier, how sometimes the controls for the overlays are inaccessible themselves. And I use a screen reader, so I can't use them. And so I tend to avoid them rather than make use of them. And usually if I do end up using them, they create more problems than they solve. They either can get in the way or they can just not do anything of use, like also what was said with alternative text for pictures, descriptions of pictures. That's another thing that can really cause issues if they're not clear enough. So that's what I would start with. Just kind of second what's already been said for the most part.
I would just like to say, along with that, the testing that we have done for clients regarding overlays, what Charles was talking about, in that there are 59 approximately WCAG 2.1 success criterion, and Charles, I believe you had mentioned only 19 of those success criterion, are quote unquote fixed or accessible when overlays are used. I know that the testing that we have done with overlays for clients, we have found that yes, like Charles has stated, it does fix some issues. I believe that we found it fixes more of what you would call the hanging lower fruit type of issues. The more complex ones, I mean, I'm trying to recall a couple of them about keyboard accessibility in particular, especially for those ones that include any kind of uh, uh, ARIA code involved. It had a really hard time fixing those related issues. So just a few little instances of that. Lynn, does that help in what you were wanting the access team to talk about?
Yeah, and I think if you guys wouldn't mind also speaking to the fact of the thing that I found really, really interesting, not being a visual user and not impact using overlays in this or encountering them in the same way, was the forced use.
Oh,
Is,
yes.
you know, yeah, you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
Suzanne.
Yes. So that's a really good point, and thank you, Lynn, for bringing that up. I too, like Dane, I use a screen reader, and with those uh, overlays, either they can detect that I'm using some type of software or keyboard, because when I go to a website, and I've experienced this professionally, for testing, but also in my personal life. If I go to a website, I was just at one too, and I can't remember what it was. Shoot. But there's an alert that keeps popping up saying, to act or to make this web page accessible, hit these combination of keys. And it's really annoying, and that message will not stop until you they also give you another option, something like, if you want these reminders to stop, or something to that effect, hit this combination of keys, and it'll stop. But I think that's really a nuisance of having to force the user, or continually encouraging or notifying the user to activate something that they might not want to activate for whatever reason. But can we hear from you, Casey? Do you want to speak on that, or is there anything that you think that me and Tane haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, my experience has been somewhat similar. I'm also a screen reader user, and a lot of times I'll encounter these sites, and it's, to me, it's every time you go to a new page, you get another pop up to try to use the feature. And
Right, that's true.
it's really hard to navigate a website, and even if you activate it, it doesn't always solve the issues. Usually, it doesn't solve anything. But if you don't activate it, then you get these barrage of pop up notifications, and to try to get you activated. So it's a headache, for sure, from my perspective.
And I'll just say really quick, once you do activate it, oh my gosh, it's like so much effort to try to deactivate it. I know that I was doing it for testing, and it was really hard to deactivate it. It's a process.
And I think that that's where, when I say that the people that create these don't really understand what people living with different disabilities and how they cope every day. So for instance, non-visual users who are screen reader proficient become experts at using screen readers. It's a tool they're used to. At WeCo, we don't even issue a lot of the folks on our team who have screen reader software have their own. Why? because they tune it the way they need it. And that's how we, they understand what they need. And so when you have to abandon using your screen reader and use a tool because something's bleeping at you all the time, that's a new learning curve. You have to learn that tool. So I'm going to just stop there and go back to Charles because he looks like he wants to say something.
Well, yeah, there's some things I'd like to circle back to, if time permitting, but yeah, it's a very important point that you just made is people who use assistive technology are generally proficient at it. If you look at industry evidence like the WebAIM screen reader survey, for example, we have a significant population of people who use screen readers who are proficient or expert or power users versus those who are novice or just getting used to it, because you rely on it in order to navigate anything. So that's the tool and software stack that you learn. By putting an overlay onto a website, you now have to learn an entirely new product just in order to operate the current website that you're on. And then you navigate away from that site to something else and you're back to, operating it the way that you're familiar with using your own software. So it's kind of invasive. It gets in the way, right? It's an additional layer. It's an additional learning curve. And what it's intending to do, again, intentions don't always equate to outcomes. What it's intending to do is provide a bunch of features that allow people to customize the web experience in different ways that may suit them. But if you rely on navigating that overlay using a keyboard or a voice assistant or some other assistive technology, you have to learn the entire product offering in order to get through it, in order to even discover a feature that might benefit you, in order to then enable that feature and turn it on. So it's just a overwhelming amount of additional content on top of a website that someone has to sift through in order to potentially find something useful in it. It's not to say that there aren't useful things in it. For example, some of these overlay products provide a feature that allows someone to easily toggle the display mode into more of a reading mode. Most browsers already offer that, but not everyone is familiar with the feature of their browser in order to turn that on and off. So it's just another way to turn on a feature that isolates text content in a way that's easier to consume. There are other ways to provide that than a software as a service that sticks an overlay with a bunch of other features on the page. I get asked this question a lot about things like toggling text size and contrast modes, things that are relatively visually impactful. And there is overwhelming consensus in the community that that's not a bad thing to provide someone that level of flexibility and customization while they're looking at a website. But what absolutely is mandatory is the default setting also has to be accessible, right? So if you're providing a toggle to a contrast mode, the default mode also has to be accessible, right? You're just providing an additional customizable way to view the content. And you can do that without one of these complicated overlays that are injecting code onto a site. Something that was mentioned also that I wanted to get back to was the evaluation process itself. So some of us who do accessibility evaluation to determine whether or not a site is accessible use various products and tools and other software to supplement that process, right? There's always a human evaluation that's mandatory, but we also use software to conduct some of that evaluation. The leading vendor of these overlay products, the one who is monopolizing search marketing, actually has gone out of their way to disable that tool, to disable a tool rather, within their source code, so that the evaluation that a popular evaluation software is normally able to provide is prevented from providing. So the overlay is basically saying, we know we can't pass your evaluation software, so we're going to create additional software to disable yours. I can't think of anything more shady.
That is amazing.
And again, I'm really trying to avoid naming product names, but it's these are very big name tools.
Oh, wow. Well, a lot of good comments. Andy, I think what we'll do, since we're getting down to the last 10 minutes, is I'll present the legal slides and then we'll just open it up for free discussion. So I'm always kind of the research geek. So I really, really love legal websites. And a really, really good one is an attorney who prosecutes a lot of accessibility cases, Lainey Feingold. That's where I dug this one up. Is there a silver bullet for accessibility? And trust me, I grew up with a disability in a family of sisters. We all had cognitive disabilities, and everybody in our company lives with a disability. We'd love it if there was a switch we could just flip and you guys could just have us test it and tell you it was great. We would love that. But I thought this was a really important quote from Richard Hunt, an accessibility defense attorney, and this was quoted from Lainey Feingold's site. If your business wants to avoid getting sued under the ADA because of an inaccessible website, an accessibility overlayer widget isn't going to help you. I can say this with some certainty because in the last 2 weeks alone, 5 lawsuits have been filed against businesses that use an accessibility widget or overlay on their websites. If avoiding litigation is your goal, an overlayer widget won't do the trick. And that's dated August 10th, 2020. So fairly recent. Next slide.
Yeah, I was just going to point that out, is note the date. This was from August. That has escalated dramatically since that time.
It has. Okay, next slide. A few things that Lainey also added to her website is that overlays focus on websites. What about your mobile apps, your kiosks, your internal workplaces tools? That leaves you wide open there. And this is something, as I'm old enough to have lived through the text-only website phase, when accessibility was done, because we were gonna develop a separate website that didn't have pictures, that had a real simple structure, and that rapidly became something that was not a good idea. But in a way, you know, really a widget is forcing someone to have a very separate experience of your website. And that is not legally responsible, nor is it socially responsible, especially in our woke era. It really is not a good idea to be treating customers, taxpayers, stakeholders as separate because of their ability level. Next slide. So the legal trends, and Charles might have more data to plug into this, but what I found is that we had a sharp uptick in lawsuits again in 2019. Accessibility overlays are being mentioned increasingly for ineffectiveness and hindrance. There was a little dip in website filings because of COVID, but they have rebounded for 2020. I couldn't find 2020 year-end stats. Do you happen to have any to share, Charles?
Not handy, but the easy way to convey the overwhelming volume of ADA Title III cases in the United States is that there are over 1 per hour.
Wow. That's a lot. Did I have another slide, Andy, beyond this? Oh, yes. Okay. Cases in point. I thought this was interesting, and these are just quotes that were pulled from actual lawsuits. On September 2nd, 2020, defendant installed a $49 a month plugin that the plugin's maker represents will turn accessible websites into WCAG and ADA compliant websites. However, notwithstanding this marketing, the plugin seems to have actually made the defendant's digital platform less accessible. That is from an actual lawsuit. And Gross versus Breville USA Incorporated, despite the inclusion of an accessibility widget that is announced to screen reader users, there are still some instances of barriers present even when the widget is activated. So those are actual recent lawsuits. So with that, we'll open it up to questions and comments.
Yeah, I'd like to inject one more quick thing on the legal aspect of this, and it comes from reading the terms of service with these vendors of accessibility overlay products. And the one that I've been kind of picking on as the worst of the bunch who has monopolized search marketing, in their terms of service, they expressly disclaim content that uses invalid markup. And as most of us know, is over 80% of all of the pages on the web. So buried within their terms of service is the fact that they already know that their software can't do anything about the overwhelming majority of pages that are on the web because they're using invalid markup. So part of this legal claim and contestation and why these products are now being included in sites and targeted are in suits and targeted in suits is this underlying fact, right? They're making blatantly false claims, and their consumers, people who buy these overlay products, are not reading the terms of service and understanding the complexity of actually complying with the standards and with the law.
I think that one of the hardest things that it is for a lot of people to accept about any market, and it is certainly in accessibility, because I've often said we're living through a wild west of accessibility right now, largely unregulated, is that there are people and organizations out there that will make up in sheer volume of sales what they'll be sued for. And they don't care about you, and they don't care about your company or your organization, and they know they will get sued, and they're hedging a bet. And it's, you know, there is no real consumer protection against these people right now. You have to be a smart.
There's a silver lining to that, in that within that rather startling statistic of at least one ADA Title III lawsuit per hour is the repeat offenders. So if you have ever had a claim against you in the past, you are now 50% more likely to have another claim filed against you in the future.
Wow. Andy, do we have any questions coming in?
I have not seen anything come in through the chat.
I have a question.
Yeah, Maureen?
Yeah, it's two questions. Just that for people that are trying to sell something as a business, I was going to buy something and I was at a site that had an overlay and had the pop-ups like Sue Ann was talking about. And I'm a screen reader user. And so I hit the two keys they told me to hit, and then it started talking, and my screen reader was talking at the same time, and I couldn't do anything, and I left. So I think people need to know that it's actually driving away potential customers. So I didn't stay on that website. I went somewhere else and bought what I was going to buy. So that was one comment. And the other one is, do the overlays, I would think that there could be a risk to site security.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. There are, again, without getting overly technical on how, essentially the JavaScript that is running this third-party application is also on a third-party server. So it has to comply with all of these cross-origin rules and you know, additional privacy and security considerations. And yes, like any software, it is including analytics tracking of its own. So absolutely, there are privacy and security concerns.
Great. Anyone else? Speak up. Anything you've wondered about?
I mean, I don't really have a specific question. I'm just new to development and designing for accessibility. So I've just been trying to attend as many of these sort of informational seminars to catch up on it. I work for Minneapolis Institute of Art, and we have had an audit, which we're having another one soon. So it's just something for me to like learn and make sure that we're coding correctly and updating our site in ways that the public can, you know, utilize it when they're going through the museum or viewing galleries online, which is now what we're doing. We just did like a huge push to start putting descriptions in all of our catalog images, which now I'm so concerned that maybe the descriptions don't fit sort of just an accessibility standard, which was brought up. So it's just all really, I mean, it's a lot of information to digest and take in. But thank you for talking about it. It's so informational. I've never even heard of an overlay. And to think that like they don't work on top of sounding like a magic tool is kind of a bummer.
Thanks.
Yeah,
For
they come by many names, and yeah, there's an overwhelming amount of information out there on accessibility, especially when you're getting started. But I just want to make sure it's clear that not all of it is true and accurate and useful. So it's really important that when you're learning about accessibility, that you learn from trusted and vetted resources, and not from random Google searches on accessibility, where you're likely to stumble across the claims of these software providers.
We did get a question, what are the recommended tools when doing manual audits? Of course, talking to us, Laura, you are going to hear that technologists who live with disabilities are very well equipped to do manual audits. Yes. So, because they understand, you know, and they will give you insights that people who are not different abled will not be able to. Do you want to comment on that at all? Go ahead, Charles.
I was just like being granular to the wording of the question. Recommended tools when doing manual audits already identifies the fact that there are people and software involved, right? So the people are the tool of choice. It takes a manual evaluation in order to understand whether or not there are accessibility issues and provide some recommended remediation when there are. But the tools that would accompany a manual evaluation are tools that help you record what you find, right? So there are things like the the what is it called? The name is escaping me. The ACT rules format and the W3C combined in publishing a evaluation tool. I think it's called EM. Escaping me at the moment.
While you're looking that up, Sue Ann, can you speak to any tools that our team uses during manual audits? Either things we've crafted on our own or?
Yeah,
I know
it's,
that,
the EM reporting
oh,
tool.
sorry. I'm sorry, Charles, can you repeat that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was just the EM reporting tool. So basically what it does, like a handful of other tools out there, is allow you to record things that you observe as a manual evaluator. It walks you through a guided process of conducting a manual evaluation and provides you a place to record what you observe.
Thank you, Charles. And I think Charles is right when he says that the first tool of choice is people. That's what we at WeCo do. But I know, Jen, if you want to speak to the tools that you use for like the color contrasting, that'd be great.
Yeah, so mainly I only use tools to determine things that I cannot determine on my own. So I use Color Contrast Analyzer for checking color contrast ratios. Personally, I do not trust all of the automated color contrast checkers that'll go through your page and tell you, where the failures are. I've had false positives. I've had it miss things. It can't always tell how things are, like if text is overlaid over an image or something like that. The only other actual tool that I use is a browser bookmarklet that can help increase the spacing on the page to see if any content's getting cut off or overlapping.
I love those bookmarklets.
I just need to let everybody know we lost our captioner at 6:30. So we're flying without captioning. And it is 6:30, so we are going to bring this to a close, but it was a great conversation. We had a great group tonight. Thanks to everyone for showing. Thank you to the accessibility team and Sue Ann Rodriguez, their director. And thank you to Charles for coming back. We're always so excited to have you with us. The next meetup, I'm not sure if we got that on a screen tonight, Andy, but the next meetup is going to be at the last Monday in March. And it is
29th of March.
And
So
we'll go ahead.
It'll be the 29th of March. It will be at the same time, 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. I'll post another Zoom link in the meetup event page, along with all of the links that we were sharing in the chat tonight. That will all be posted in tonight's meetup event page. So if you want to do a little bit more research on your own, those tools will be available for you. And then again, I just wanted to share a special thanks to our sponsors, United Health Group and WeCo Accessibility Services. Again, without them, we wouldn't be able to host these type of meetups.
Great, thank you. Night, everyone. Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Access Team, Sue Ann.
Welcome. Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.